You ever think about how, when it comes to money, what you learn in school feels,
Hmm.
well, kind of disconnected from how things actually work?
Oh, absolutely. It's like there's this whole other set of rules maybe learned at home, or sometimes not learned at home, which is the problem.
Exactly. And that brings us to today's deep dive. We're getting into Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a book that really shook things up.
It did. It's not just advice. It challenges, basic ideas about wealth by showing these two totally opposite ways of thinking about money.
Yeah, through his own life story, right? He had these two father figures.
That's the core of it.
Uh,
His biological dad, who he calls poor dad, was super educated, PhD, top universities, scholarships, the works, highly respected
A
academic.
traditional path.
Right. And then there was rich dad, his best friend's father. Incredibly, this guy never even finished 8th grade.
Wow. That's a stark
It
contrast.
couldn't be starker, and
Yeah.
their advice on money was just worlds apart.
So that's what we want to unpack today. We're going to look at these different viewpoints, pull out the key lessons Kiyosaki learned, and explore how they might change your perspective on money and getting financially independent.
Yeah, we'll summarize the main ideas and really talk about why they might matter to you listening right now.
Okay, so let's start with those philosophies. Poor dad's advice. What did that sound like?
Well, it's probably familiar to a lot of us, stay in school, study hard,
Check.
find a good, secure company to work for, play it safe, avoid risks.
The safe road. Makes sense from his background.
Totally. And a big one. Our home is our largest investment and our greatest asset. He believed in job security, pensions, benefits. He even felt that the love of money is the root of all evil.
Okay, very traditional. Now, rich dad
Yeah.
flips the script entirely, right?
Completely. Rich dad would say things like, the lack of money is the root of all evil. A direct challenge.
Whoa, okay.
Instead of working for a company, his advice was, study hard so you can find a good company to buy.
Buy it. Not work for it. Different league.
Totally different. And forget playing it safe. He said, learn to manage risk. And that controversial one about the house.
Ah, yes, the house.
My house is a liability, he'd say. And if your house is your largest investment, you're in trouble. His focus was all on financial self-reliance. The big idea, money works for me, not the other way around.
Having those two strong opposing voices must have been something.
Kiyosaki says it forced him to think more, compare the ideas and then choose for himself. He couldn't just accept one view.
So fostered critical thinking about money from a young age.
Exactly. And it showed him that money lessons are mostly learned at home, not school, which helps explain why sometimes really smart, highly educated people can still struggle financially. They just weren't taught this other stuff.
That really resonates. It's about the environment. And one of the first mindset shifts Rich Dad pushed was that phrase thing, right? The I can't afford it versus,
Now, how can I afford it? Yes.
yeah.
It sounds simple, but the impact is huge.
Explain that a bit more. What's the actual, mental process there? How do you train yourself to ask the second question?
Well, initially, it takes conscious effort. I can't afford it. That's like slamming a door in your brain. It stops thought. It's often just an emotional reflex.
Right, it's an endpoint.
Exactly. But asking, how can I afford it? That forces your brain to open up, to search for possibilities, for solutions. It's like a mental exercise. You're strengthening your financial creativity instead of just giving up.
So it's about activating the problem-solving part of your brain.
Precisely. It's not about magically being able to afford it instantly, but about starting the process of figuring it out, a fundamental shift.
And that ties into that big lesson. The rich don't work for money. He learned this early on, right? Working for Rich Dad for almost nothing.
Yeah, the famous 10 cents an hour job him and his friend Mike had. Their kids, feeling totally exploited, naturally.
I bet. So what was Rich Dad actually doing there? Was it just being cheap?
No, it was much deeper. He called it a taste of life. The point was to teach them that most people spend their best years working for money without ever really understanding what they're working for.
Ah, so it was a lesson in the work itself.
Yes, it was a direct experience of what Kiyosaki calls the rat race. You know that cycle. Get up, go to work, pay bills, repeat, endlessly.
We all know that feeling.
And he connects it to our emotions. Fear and greed. The fear of being broke and the desire, the greed for more money, which just fuels the cycle. People react emotionally instead of thinking strategically about their finances.
But he says there is another way. If you can face those emotions
Right.
and learn to make money work for you.
That's the promise. But yeah, it takes confronting the fear and greed and then getting the financial education to actually do it. It requires, like you said, courage and discipline.
Which brings us to rule number 1, the big one.
The big one. Rich Dad apparently said it was the only rule you needed. Rich people acquire assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets.
Okay, that sounds crucial, but also maybe confusing. How does traditional education blind us to this?
Well, the definitions Rich Dad uses are incredibly simple, almost startlingly so. An asset puts money in my pocket.
Okay,
Simple enough.
a liability takes money out of my pocket.
Right. Puts in, takes out.
Got it.
It's that simple. But Kiyosaki argues that conventionally smart adults often miss this because they're trained to think in more complex, sometimes misleading financial terms. They focus on net worth, maybe, without looking at cash flow.
So it's about the direction the money is flowing.
Exactly. He uses cash flow patterns to illustrate it. For a poor person, income comes in from a job and flows right back out for expenses, rent, food, taxes. There's basically no asset column.
Okay.
For the middle class, income from a job also comes in, but it flows out to bigger expenses, mortgage, car payments, credit cards, student loans. Often these are for things they call assets, like their house or car, but since they take money out each month.
By Rich Dad's definition, they're liabilities. The house is the classic example.
Right. It's the main one he highlights for the middle class, yes. Because it takes money out for mortgage, taxes, insurance, upkeep.
Okay, so what does the rich person's pattern look like?
It's different. They focus on building the asset column first. Things like income-generating real estate, stocks, bonds, maybe intellectual property. These assets generate income rent, dividends, interest.
So the money flows from the assets.
Right. That income then covers their expenses, and crucially, the leftover money is reinvested back into buying more assets. It creates a positive feedback loop, wealth building on autopilot almost.
That makes sense. It's a cycle that feeds itself.
And he uses this great analogy, the Leaning Tower of Suburbia.
Ah, okay, what's that?
It describes how, for many middle-class folks, getting a raise or more income doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to buying a bigger house, a nicer car, more stuff, essentially, bigger liabilities.
So more income equals more expenses, more debt. The tower gets taller, but more precarious.
Exactly. They get trapped deeper in the rat race, just at a higher income level. So the real key isn't just earning more. It's about financial aptitude, managing the money you do have, keeping it, protecting it, and making it work for you.
So if earning more isn't the silver bullet, how do people escape that tower? It sounds like it involves more sophisticated management.
It does. And a big part of that, Kiyosaki argues, is understanding how the rich use corporations.
Ah, the C word. Sounds intimidating.
Well, he explains a bit of tax history, how income tax started for the rich but then spread to everyone else, partly because people bought into this Robin Hood fantasy of taxing the rich.
Right, but the rich found ways around it.
That's his point. They used legal structures, like corporations. And he stresses a corporation isn't always a skyscraper. It can just be, legal paperwork. But that paperwork allows for different rules.
Different rules how?
The big difference he hammers home is this. Employees earn money, get taxed on it, then try to live on what's left.
Sounds familiar.
A corporation, however, earns money, spends everything it can spend on legitimate business expenses, and then gets taxed on whatever profit is left over.
So spending happens before taxes.
For the corporation, yes. Things like cars, maybe part of your home office, travel for board meetings, health insurance. These can potentially become pre-tax business expenses within the legal framework of a corporation, reducing taxable income significantly. It's about understanding and using the rules.
Okay, that's a major shift in thinking. It requires a certain level of financial IQ, as he calls it.
Exactly. He breaks financial IQ down into 4 key pillars. First is accounting or financial literacy. Basically, can you read the numbers, understand a financial statement?
Makes sense. Gotta speak the language.
Second is investing, the science of making money, different strategies, risks, returns.
Okay.
Third is understanding markets, supply and demand, economic trends, but also the psychology, the emotions that drive markets, like fear and greed again.
Right. Knowing when people are panicking or getting euphoric.
Precisely. And fourth is the law. Knowing the rules of the game, tax advantages, like using corporations, or specific loopholes like Section 131 for real estate. Also, how to protect your assets legally.
And he says true financial intelligence is mixing all 4.
Yeah, it's the synergy. Knowing accounting helps your investing, understanding markets tells you when to invest, and the law helps you keep more of your returns and protect yourself. They all work together.
But even if you know all this stuff, there are still hurdles, right? Personal ones. You mentioned obstacles.
5 big ones: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance.
Let's talk about fear. That seems like a big one for money.
Huge. Kiyosaki flat out says the main difference between rich and poor is how they manage fear. Rich Dad taught him that winning often means not being afraid to lose.
That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, but think about it. He argues that failure isn't the opposite of success, it's part of it. Losing can inspire you, teach you lessons. He uses examples like Thomas Edison failing thousands of times the light bulb, or Texans yelling, "Remember the Alamo." Failure becomes fuel.
So reframe failure as feedback.
Essentially, yes. For the financially successful, it's data. For others, it's paralyzing fear.
Okay, what about cynicism? The chicken little thing.
Oh, yeah. That's when fear and doubt curdle into this attitude where you just criticize everything. You hear about an opportunity, and instead of analyzing it, you shoot it down. Oh, that'll never work.
We all know people like that.
Right. And Kiyosaki tells that story about his friend missing a great real estate deal because some neighbor who knew nothing about investing just muttered it was a bad idea. Cynicism, often masking fear, makes you miss opportunities. Savvy investors, he says, often make their best money when everyone else is panicking the worst of times.
And then there's laziness.
Yeah.
But he frames it interestingly with the I don't wants.
Yeah, that's clever. People say, I don't want to deal with tenants, or I don't want to fix toilets, as reasons not to invest in real estate.
Common objections.
But Rich Dad flipped it. Those I don't wants are clues. If you don't want to fix toilets, great. Find and hire an excellent property manager who does want to do it, or whose business it is. Use the objection to find a solution. Don't let it be a roadblock.
So turn the excuse into a delegation task.
Exactly. Problem solving again. And that connects to bad habits, especially paying yourself last.
Right. The opposite of pay yourself first.
Yes, that classic advice from the richest man in Babylon. Most people get paid, pay their bills, pay the tax man, pay everyone else, and if there's anything left, then they might save or invest.
Paying yourself whatever scraps are left over.
Pretty much. Rich Dad did the opposite. Pay yourself first, put money into your asset column first, even if it meant you were short for bills.
Ooh, that sounds stressful. Bills piling up.
It can be stressful, but Rich Dad argued that pressure is good. It forces you to think, okay, I've paid myself, now how am I going to cover these bills? It sparks creativity, makes you find ways to generate more income, negotiate, hustle. The pressure builds financial muscle.
Instead of relieving the pressure by paying yourself last. Interesting take. It all comes back to mindset.
It really does, which leads to the idea of minding your own business.
Which doesn't mean being nosy.
No, not at all. He makes a clear distinction. Your profession is what you do to earn money, your job, doctor, teacher, plumber, whatever. But your business? That's your asset column. The thing you build that generates income for you, separate from your job.
So you could be a teacher by profession, but your business could be rental properties or a stock portfolio.
Exactly. The goal is to build your business, your assets, so eventually you don't have to rely solely on your profession for income.
And he has that specific definition of wealth from Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah, it's powerful. Wealth isn't just a big pile of money. It's a person's ability to survive so many number of days forward. Or, put simply, if I stop working today, how long could I survive?
Based on the income from your assets covering your expenses.
Precisely. If your assets generate enough cash flow to cover your monthly expenses indefinitely, you're wealthy by that definition. Even if your net worth isn't huge, you have financial independence.
So what kind of assets does he actually point to? What should be in that business column?
He lists several types of real assets, businesses that don't need you there day to day running them.
Okay, passive involvement.
Stocks, especially maybe small cap or promising startups if you have the knowledge, bonds. Notes like IOUs, he gives an example of creating a $40,000 note from a deal. Intellectual property royalties from books, music, patents, and income-generating real estate is a big one for him.
Things that produce cash flow.
That's the key. And linked to this is his rule about luxuries.
Oh, yes, the Mercedes example.
Right. Luxuries come last. You don't buy the fancy car or the big boat with debt or your salary. You build up your assets first. Once those assets are throwing off enough extra cash flow, then you use that asset-generated cash to buy the luxury. His wife Kim's Mercedes wasn't bought with a loan. It was paid for by the income from their apartment buildings.
That requires serious discipline. Buy the asset that buys luxury.
It's a total mindset shift from the instant gratification, buy it now on credit culture.
Okay,
Yep.
so underlying all of this seems to be just learning constantly, financial education.
Absolutely central. Kiyosaki hammers this home. In this information age, he says, it's not just what you know, it's how fast you can learn new things.
And traditional school doesn't cut it for this kind of learning.
It teaches you to be a good employee, a professional, but not how to be financially intelligent, how to build assets. He really urges people, invest first in education, specifically financial education, learn the language of money.
And he created a tool for that, right? The game.
Yes, the Cashflow board game. It's designed to simulate the process. You learn about financial statements, assets, liabilities, getting out of the rat race, but with play money. So you can make mistakes and learn without real-world consequences. It's experiential learning.
Trying it out in a safe space makes sense. His own path wasn't straightforward either, was it?
Not at all. He talks about struggling in traditional school, not being great at writing or accounting initially. He says his real education, the one that led him to his purpose of teaching financial literacy, was more holistic, spirit, emotional, mental, physical. It wasn't just academics.
It shows that learning happens in many ways beyond formal schooling.
Definitely. And it often requires learning skills outside your main profession.
Yeah.
He makes that point about the better hamburger.
Right, you can make the best burger in the world.
But if you don't know how to sell it, market it, manage the business side, you'll likely stay poor. So he advocates learning sales, marketing, communication skills. They're crucial no matter your technical expertise.
Being able to connect and persuade.
Yes. And finally, maybe surprisingly, he talks about the power of giving.
Giving. How does that fit with getting rich?
His belief, maybe from Rich Dad, is if you want something, you first need to give. Want more money? Find ways to give money or value first. Want knowledge? Share your knowledge. It creates a flow, a sort of universal reciprocity. Generosity leads to receiving.
That's a really interesting, almost spiritual principle woven into financial advice.
It is. It adds another layer to the mindset.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, the core ideas from Rich Dad, Poor Dad seem to be this huge contrast. Working for money versus having money work for you.
Definitely. And that critical difference between an asset puts money in your pocket and a liability takes money out. Getting that right is fundamental.
And the absolute necessity of ongoing financial education, learning how money really works, not just how to earn a paycheck.
It's about developing a whole different kind of intelligence beyond just academic smarts, financial intelligence.
Yeah, which leaves us, and you listening, with a big question, doesn't it? Thinking about your own finances right now, are you mainly collecting things that put money in your pocket? Or are you, maybe without realizing it, mostly acquiring things that take it out?
And maybe, what's one small habit you could start today? Like that idea of paying yourself first, even just a little bit, to begin building that asset column.
It's worth thinking about. Maybe look at your own cash flow. Where does the money actually go? And maybe seek out some new ideas or talk to someone who's already doing what you want to do financially.
Because as Kiyosaki says, those great opportunities, they aren't usually seen with your eyes. They're seen with your mind. You have to learn to recognize them.